What about family? You parade around with Sarah while your real family is cast aside like yesterday's news. Where's your loyalty, Liz? Her words were like venom, dripping with judgment and a twisted sense of righteousness. My name is Elizabeth, but most people call me Liz. It was a chilly December morning, the kind that whispers of the holiday season and its joys. My husband Michael and I were preparing for my company's Christmas party that evening. Amidst the aroma of hair dye and the steam from Michael's shower, I found a moment of peace, a rare commodity in our bustling household. Suddenly, my phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Harrow, my mother-in-law, announced her imminent arrival. She was always one for surprises, but today her timing couldn't have been worse. I glanced at the clock, 10:45 a.m. She'd be here in less than half an hour. As I hurried to rinse the dye from my hair, I heard the front door open. Harrow entered, her presence as commanding as ever. Her eyes darted around, landing on the absence of my younger son, Alex. "Where's Alex?" she demanded, her voice laced with irritation. I explained calmly, "He's with Sarah, my best friend. They're out Christmas shopping, and she's watching him overnight so Michael and I can enjoy the party." Mrs. Harrow's brow furrowed, her displeasure evident. "Every time I want to do something with him, he's with Sarah," she accused, her tone rising. I tried to maintain my composure. "Mom, Sarah and I like to take Alex on little adventures. Michael knows where we are, and he enjoys his quiet time. It works for us." But Mrs. Harrow was not one to be appeased easily. She launched into a tirade about the importance of family, especially during Christmas. Her words were like daggers, accusing and sharp. That's when Daniel, my older son, entered the room. At 20, he carried the air of someone who had seen the world through eyes too wise for his age. He had been at odds with Mrs. Harrow's conservative views, finding them bigoted and narrow-minded. "I won't be at your house on Christmas Day," Daniel stated firmly, his voice steady. Mrs. Harrow's face turned a shade of red I hadn't seen before. The argument escalated, with Daniel remaining unyielding in his stance. "No, I am not going," he repeated, his resolve unshaken. As I stepped into the fray, trying to remind Mrs. Harrow of the boundaries we had set as a family, she seemed to lose all semblance of control. "Why can't you just be there?" she pleaded, her voice cracking with emotion. Her question brought back painful memories. 3 years ago, Jenna and Richard, my sister-in-law and her husband, had punished Alex, then just 6, without our consent. It was an incident that left deep scars, not just on Alex, but on our entire family. I tried to explain, to make her understand why we had set these boundaries, but it was like talking to a wall. Mrs. Harrow was not one to respect limits, let alone understand them. As I stood in my kitchen, dye-stained towel wrapped around my head, I faced Mrs. Harrow's wrath. Her anger was like a storm, unpredictable and fierce. "It's always Sarah this, Sarah that. What about family?" she exclaimed, her voice rising with each word. I tried to reason with her. "Sarah is family, in a way. She's been there for us, for Alex. It's not about choosing her over you," I explained, striving to keep my voice even. Mrs. Harrow was relentless. "You're excluding us, your own family." "It's Christmas, Liz. The time for family to be together," she argued, her eyes flashing with a mix of anger and hurt. It was a delicate balancing act, one I had been performing for years. My husband Michael and I had different ideas of leisure. He was a homebody, content with his hobbies and friend group, while I thrived on activities and excursions with Sarah and Alex. This arrangement, though untraditional, worked perfectly for us. Michael knew he could always join us, and he was happy with the arrangement. However, Mrs. Harrow saw it differently. To her, our lifestyle was a deviation from the norm, a rejection of family traditions she held dear. Her tirade shifted towards Christmas plans. "You're not making plans with Sarah for Christmas, are you?" she questioned, her tone accusatory. I reassured her, "No, we have no plans with Sarah for Christmas." But the backstory ran deeper. Michael's sister Jenna and her husband Richard had created a rift in the family, one that went beyond mere disagreements. Their actions towards Alex 3 years ago were inexcusable, a breach of trust that we could not overlook. They had taken it upon themselves to discipline him, misunderstanding his energetic nature as a sign of misbehavior. As a mother, my priority was Alex's well-being. Michael and I believed in guiding him with understanding and empathy, especially considering his ADD. We had worked hard to create an environment where he felt supported and loved, not judged or punished unjustly. The room filled with tension, each word from Mrs. Harrow amplifying the divide between us. She failed to see the harm her daughter and son-in-law had caused, blinded perhaps by familial loyalty or societal norms. I remained seated, trying to maintain a semblance of calm in the face of her increasing agitation. Her small frame seemed to grow with her anger, as she loomed over me, demanding an explanation, a compromise, anything that would fit her narrative of a perfect family gathering. But some boundaries, once crossed, cannot be mended so easily. The air in the kitchen was thick with tension, a stark contrast to the festive decorations adorning the rest of the house. Daniel stood there, embodying the defiance of youth, his eyes locked with Mrs. Harrow's. He was a young man coming into his own, unafraid to stand up for his beliefs. "I've told you, Grandma, I'm not comfortable with your views. I won't pretend for the sake of a holiday," he said calmly, his voice resolute. Mrs. Harrow's face contorted with disbelief. "You're being disrespectful, Daniel. It's Christmas, a time for family to come together, regardless of differences," she retorted, her voice strained. Daniel's stance was unwavering. He had always been sensitive to issues of bigotry and discrimination, and the narrow-mindedness of some family members was something he could not overlook. "Family doesn't mean tolerating hate," he replied. Mrs. Harrow seemed taken aback by his directness. "We're your family, Daniel. How can you turn your back on us?" I watched the exchange, torn between admiration for Daniel's courage and concern for the escalating situation. The conversation was a culmination of years of suppressed disagreements and conflicting worldviews. The plan had been to visit Mrs. Harrow's on Christmas Eve for a few hours, maintaining a semblance of family unity while staying true to our values. But Daniel's outright refusal to attend any gathering at her house on Christmas Day was a line drawn in the sand. Mrs. Harrow turned her frustration towards me. "Liz, talk some sense into your son. He's tearing this family apart," she pleaded. But how could I? Daniel's convictions were a reflection of the values Michael and I had instilled in him, values of respect, equality, and tolerance. As I tried to mediate the situation, reminding Mrs. Harrow of our commitment to attend on Christmas Eve, she seemed inconsolable. Her vision of a perfect family Christmas was crumbling, and with it, her composure. "You're all ungrateful," she lamented, her voice breaking. "After everything I've done for this family." The conversation was going in circles, with no resolution in sight. Daniel's stance, though painful for Mrs. Harrow, was a necessary assertion of his identity and beliefs. It was a stand against the prejudices that had long cast a shadow over our family gatherings. In that moment, the generational divide was more apparent than ever, a chasm widened by evolving social consciousness and rigid traditions. The confrontation in our kitchen had turned into more than a disagreement. It was a revelation of deeper wounds and long-standing conflicts. Mrs. Harrow's insistence on a unified family Christmas was laced with a denial of the issues that had driven us apart. I looked at her, trying to find the right words. "Mom, you know why we can't just be there," I said gently. "What happened with Jenna and Richard, it changed things." 3 years ago, during a family gathering, Jenna and Richard had decided to discipline Alex for his energetic behavior, a result of his ADD. They hadn't understood, or perhaps hadn't cared to understand, that Alex's liveliness was not misbehavior, but a part of who he was. They had taken it upon themselves to physically reprimand him, crossing a line that, for Michael and me, was sacred. The memory still stung. Alex, then only 6, had come to us, tears streaming down his face, confused and hurt by the actions of family members he had trusted. It was a breach of trust, an act that had fractured our family in ways that were still healing. Mrs. Harrow's face softened momentarily, a flicker of understanding crossing her features, but it was quickly replaced by a familiar stubbornness. "They were just trying to help. He needs to learn discipline," she countered, her voice firm. I felt a surge of protectiveness. "We do discipline Alex, but in a way that helps him understand and grow. We talk to him, help him regulate his emotions. We don't believe in physical punishment," I explained, my voice steady but firm. Mrs. Harrow shook her head, unable to accept our parenting style. "In my time, a little discipline never hurt anyone. You're all too soft on him." The conversation was going nowhere. Mrs. Harrow, set in her ways, could not see the harm that Jenna and Richard's actions had caused. To her, family was about sticking together, no matter what. But to us it was about respect, understanding, and empathy, values that seemed increasingly alien to her. The tension in the room was palpable. Mrs. Harrow's inability to acknowledge our pain, to understand our perspective, was a wall that seemed insurmountable. And as much as I wished for a harmonious family, I knew that some divides were too deep to bridge. The air in the room was heavy, charged with years of unspoken grievances and misunderstandings. Mrs. Harrow's insistence on maintaining appearances, on upholding a facade of familial unity, was crumbling under the weight of reality. As she continued to press for our attendance at the family Christmas gathering, I could feel the tension mounting. Daniel stood by, a silent sentinel, his earlier words still hanging in the air. Michael, hearing the commotion, emerged from the shower, his presence adding another layer of complexity to the already fraught situation. "I don't understand why you can't just show up. Is it so hard to be a family for one day?" Mrs. Harrow implored, her voice tinged with desperation. Her words struck a chord, but not in the way she intended. "It's not about just showing up, Mom. It's about respect, about acknowledging the hurt that's been caused," I replied, my voice steady but filled with emotion. In that moment, something in Mrs. Harrow snapped. Her face contorted with frustration and anger, and she raised her hand as if to strike me. Instinctively, I dodged, standing up from my chair, a mix of shock and defiance in my eyes. "Enough!" I exclaimed. "I won't let you guilt-trip us, not me, not my sons. We have our boundaries, and it's high time you respect them." The room fell silent. Mrs. Harrow's hand hovered in the air, a symbol of the breach that had just occurred. Michael stepped forward, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to the emotional turmoil surrounding us. "Mom, you need to leave," he said, his voice firm but devoid of anger. "This isn't how we solve things in this family." The standoff that followed was tense. Mrs. Harrow, her pride wounded, her authority challenged, looked between us, as if seeing us for the first time. There was a moment, brief and fleeting, where I thought I saw regret in her eyes, but it was quickly masked by the familiar stubborn resolve. Without a word, she turned and left, the door closing behind her with a finality that felt symbolic. We stood there, a family united, not just by blood, but by a shared understanding of what was right and what was wrong. The encounter with Mrs. Harrow was a turning point, a moment where we chose respect and empathy over compliance and tradition. After Mrs. Harrow's departure, the house felt eerily silent, as if the walls themselves were absorbing the shock of the confrontation. Michael, Daniel, and I sat down, a collective sigh escaping our lips. It was a moment of reflection, a pause in the storm that had just passed through our home. "We did the right thing," Michael said, breaking the silence. His voice was calm, but I could see the turmoil in his eyes. Standing up to his mother was not something he took lightly, but the values we shared as a family were non-negotiable. Daniel nodded in agreement, a sense of maturity beyond his years evident in his demeanor. "I'm proud of us," he added, his words carrying a weight that resonated with all of us. I looked at them, my heart swelling with a mix of pride and sorrow. Pride for the stand we had taken, for the unity we had shown in the face of adversity, and sorrow for the family ties that were strained, perhaps irreparably so. "We've always known our family was different," I mused aloud. "But different doesn't mean wrong. We've built something special here, something based on understanding, respect, and love." The conversation shifted to the upcoming Christmas party, a welcome distraction from the day's events. Sarah would be joining us, a testament to the family we had chosen, the bonds we had formed beyond blood relations. "We'll have a good time tonight," I said, a smile tugging at the corners of my lips. "And we'll have our own celebration with your brother tomorrow, a small but meaningful gathering." As we talked, the tension began to dissipate, replaced by a sense of anticipation for the festivities ahead. It was a reminder that despite the challenges we faced, we had each other, a foundation strong enough to weather any storm. In that moment, I realized that boundaries were not just about keeping others out. They were about protecting what was important, about nurturing the relationships that truly mattered. As the day gave way to evening and we prepared for the party, I felt a sense of resolve settle over me. Our family, with all its complexities and imperfections, was a tapestry woven with threads of resilience, love, and a deep-seated understanding of what it meant to be there for each other, no matter what. The evening of the Christmas party arrived, a stark contrast to the day's earlier turmoil. As Michael, Daniel, and I stepped into the festive atmosphere, adorned with twinkling lights and merry decorations, a sense of relief washed over me. The laughter and music filled the air, creating a bubble of joy and escapism. Sarah greeted us with her usual warmth, her presence a reminder of the family we had chosen. She had been more than a best friend. She was a confidant, a sister in every way that mattered. Her understanding smile told me she knew of the day's events, yet her eyes spoke of support and solidarity. The party was a delightful escape, a chance to revel in the company of friends and colleagues. As we mingled, laughed, and danced, the weight of Mrs. Harrow's visit seemed to lift, replaced by a sense of freedom and belonging. Daniel, usually reserved, seemed to enjoy himself, his earlier confrontation with his grandmother a distant memory in the merriment of the night. Michael, ever the quiet observer, watched with a contented smile, his love for our little family evident in his gentle gaze. As the night wore on, my thoughts turned to the next day's gathering with my brother. It would be a smaller affair, but no less significant. It was a celebration of our own, a reflection of the values we held dear: respect, understanding, and unconditional love. The party came to a close, and as we headed home, the streets were quiet, the festive lights guiding our way. In the car, the silence was comfortable, reflective. We had weathered a storm, but in its wake, we found a renewed sense of purpose and unity. As I lay in bed that night, the events of the day replaying in my mind, I realized that our family's strength lay in our ability to embrace our differences, to stand up for what we believed in, and to choose love over conformity. Our Christmas would be different, but it would be ours, a celebration of the bonds we had nurtured, of the trials we had overcome, and of the love that held us together. In the end, that was what mattered most, the knowledge that we were there for each other unconditionally and without reservation. Our family, with all its quirks and challenges, was a testament to the enduring power of love, understanding, and the courage to stand up for what's right.